and welcome to the Women of Color in Business podcast. I am Lynette Cottrell, your host, and I am so delighted you decided to join us today. We are going on a transformative journey of embracing radical self-love and unlocking the full potential in both our personal and business lives. This podcast is dedicated to empowering us, Black women entrepreneurs, to break free from self-limiting beliefs and guiding us towards our best self. So if you're just starting your business or you've been at it for a while but feel stuck, we got you. Welcome to your safe place. We honor your unique business journey. Here is where you remove your mask, wear your own style of comfort, and get ready to soar. Together, we will grow exponentially and challenge the statistics of how our businesses headed and founded by Black women entrepreneurs, start, grow, and last. So enjoy this great episode and be sure to help us grow by letting your sisters in business know about us so they can also follow us, like us, give us 5 stars, and leave comments. We want to hear from you and know what you want to hear from us. Together, we're going to build a great ecosystem here, impacting the number of Black women-owned businesses that grow and last. All right, sisters, let's jump right into it. Hello, wonderful women of color in business. Today we are graced with the presence of another beautiful Black woman who's going to share some very wonderful information with us today. I'm going to begin by allowing her to introduce herself and her business to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lynette, and thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you and your audience. I'm Susan Mandrew. My pronouns are she, her. I'm recently retired and from my life in corporate, and I'm taking the next big step in my life as to, work my passion this time and integrate all of my experience around that, the lived experience as well as the corporate experience. My background has been in human resources and healthcare administration. And throughout that journey, I wanted to help and myself understand human suffering because I saw it, in my role as an HR person, either through performance and in my lived experience as someone who is a survivor of intimate partner and domestic violence. And the pursuit of that led me to study deeply trauma and trauma recovery. And also more recently, attaching to that because I got so attached to the trauma story, I didn't realize there was another story to be told. And that other story was the pursuit of joy and assuming that I can attain that for myself and share it with others. So, through my HR work, I became a yoga teacher. And how I found yoga was interesting. My first teacher was a Black woman here in Harlem. I live in Harlem. And when I met her and her students coming out of a class, so it wasn't during a class, they looked like they had halos. Their auras were so vibrant and luminous. It's like I didn't feel that way at that time. And I turned to her name is Tracy. I turned to her at the time and said, "Are you the yoga teacher?" And I became her student for 5 years. I never missed a class. If I did, they set out an alarm for me, like something happened.
Wow, that's a commitment, 5 years and never missed a class.
Yeah, because there was sort of through that process of, not the performance of the practice in asana and the exercise of it was really going inside,
Mm.
and moving through the body and feeling releases of things that I didn't know were there or had language for.
Ah.
So from there, she sent me on my way because she said I asked too many questions and it was time to pursue pursue teaching on my own, and I did. Um,
Oh,
and I love that about us when we're in community together as Black women and we see the potential, even if that person doesn't see it in themselves in that moment.
yes, yes.
That's all someone who may not have had um, an experience where they're exposed to just receiving goodness in their life because
Mm.
of a traumatic experience.
Ah, I like that. When you talk about receiving goodness in your life, I think that is a big part. What I am passionate about is us being entrepreneurs and building wealth, but also building joy and health. So
Yes.
I say I'm passionate about the joy, health, and wealth of Black women because I think all three have got to work together. And I think we become better in each one when we realize that. So, and when we talk about building a business and you think about being able to accept um, someone saying you're good or, you're good at something or seeing you're good at something and able to tell you that they see a future for it in you or just being able to accept that compliment of, yeah, that's true. And feeling in your body. A lot of
Yeah.
times when we're out in the public, our mind says we're building a business. Our activities say we want to build a business, but internally there can very well be a conflict with being successful,
Hmm.
right? Not just a fear of will I become profitable? Will I be able to make what I want to make? But the fear of do I deserve it? Am I worthy of it? Is it going to happen to me? Even though it's what we say we're going for and we're laying out all the plans for it, when we start really marching in it, that's when the things that are deep within us start coming up. And a lot of
Absolutely.
times we don't recognize what they are. So, to your point, one of them could very well be that we really don't think we're worthy of being a successful business person who can build wealth, right? We can play around with a hobby and call it a business, but can we really build it and expand it and grow it and have a legacy and pass it down in our family? Are we really capable of that? And it's more so than just knowing the technique and the information, it's feeling the worthiness and feeling empowered to do it, right? So I love that you brought up that topic because that is so is something that we don't really recognize because going around in business circles, that's not the topic of conversation.
It
It's
isn't. You're
how's your
right.
business paying?
Absolutely not.
What is your funding? What are you doing for marketing? But there is so much more to this process. So I love that you brought that up.
Thank you, Lynette. And, to your point, reinforcing ourselves
Mm,
in health and wellness, deep reflection, support. And I'll talk about the coaching piece and, more about my business in a moment. But I really wanted to speak to your point about even before we get into those rooms where we're presenting the work that we put into ourselves and walking into a room knowing that we're not supposed, sometimes it's not felt comfortable
yeah.
or being received in those kinds of rooms.
Mm,
So that's real as well.
mm,
And so that worthiness has to come from within because if we're relying on it, externally, outside of the support in our tribe and the people, who are speaking, life into us, mentoring us, undergirding us, correcting us.
Right.
I've gotten a lot of corrections on my brief journey into entrepreneurships that I'm deeply grateful for and very humbled by. And, all of that being done in community, and those kinds of conversations that our families had at the dinner table versus, our white counterparts, as an example, were very different conversations. There
Right.
could have been conversations at, white friends of mine where their fathers are talking about the stock market.
Hmm.
There is a real orientation to understanding how this system of capitalism in corporate America works.
Yeah.
Many of us, thank God, we're coming through second generations now, but being first generations in these systems it's alien, unfamiliar, and there's a reason that we're building wealth amongst each other. My thing, and why I love your platform so much, is you're creating community that we can have these kinds of discussions in places where it would even be seen as a weakness
Mm.
to talk about, feelings of imposter syndrome. And you and I spoke about that. I
Yeah.
think our first discussions.
Hmm.
Um, that shows up in anxiety and, in performance in life. But with the work I've been doing over those years from that time in the journey of being a yoga teacher, I wanted to know more. Then 2020 happened at the hospital, and COVID, the pandemic broke out. As I was saying, that during 2020, I really had an awakening. And I was called upon to go way above and beyond the scope of duty in my role. And I resisted it.
Mm.
I resisted it because it's like, why me? Why now? And when God said, don't question me. Again, that was another correction. I tend to hear more,
Hmm.
in the correction, and that could be somewhat of a trauma response as well. Why can't the gentle, encouragement be more, if not more, than, do this better? So
Uh-huh.
all inner dialogue gets played out in ways that may have served us in times when we were in survival.
Mm.
But now coming into entrepreneurship and coming into creating new legacies and stories for our futures and our families, you know, it may be somewhat unfamiliar. And that feeling and experience can also feel overwhelming. I know I have felt, overwhelmed at times.
Hmm.
So the coaching came in. I became a coach because I wanted to not be the advisor all the time and the advice giver, in scenarios, because people have the capacity. We have capacity so much. And let me stay on track here. I can go off on many tangents. So I became a coach. And then George Floyd happened. I was called to step in to do DEI work at the hospital and anti-racist work and spread the message. And I became a facilitator of unconscious bias and really having intimate conversations with folks that I, were colleagues of, but I wasn't in community with until then.
Ah, okay.
And I saw the power of community. The sadness I have is after the crisis tends to subside, the conversations also tend to subside.
Mm.
So,
So when it
um,
leaves the news cycle, then the conversation leaves too. It's not the hot topic.
yeah, so being the drivers of our own narratives, where we're not depending on those news cycles,
Ah.
because the disconnection is destabilizing.
Mm.
Where did everyone go?
Right, right.
In those times. So just seeing, people really wanting to understand themselves and each other. And again, just understanding through as a hobby, I pursued, understanding trauma and how it shows up in the body.
Mm.
It's defined as too much too soon or not enough when needed, especially when it's coming from a caregiver, someone who should have been taking care of someone.
Mm. Mm.
That disconnection sets a whole series of conditioned tendencies and behaviors in place, unaddressed, and rightfully so, because if we're making someone feel better, we're appeasing them so we won't be harmed, or we won't, we're looking for the safety.
Mm.
They're looking for the safety and how that shows up. So I pursued somatics. I discovered somatics, and I thought it was the perfect blend of everything I've enjoyed: dance, yoga, feeling liberated through movement.
Mm.
And I brought it into my coaching experience.
So how would you describe somatics?
I would describe somatics by making a comparison.
Okay.
I would say that somatics is the our living being in its fullness and wholeness from the inside out. It's aligned to our values, what's important to us, our ancestry, our community, all of that, the environment that we live in. So we're just not this individual person, but we're part of a big system versus the body that gets defined by society for us, who gets to live, who lives in a preferred body type
Mm.
where others are not feeling as though they're living in the body that would gain them access to these opportunities that they're looking for. So it's very objectified. But our beingness, and for many of us, it being attached to our spirit life, our spirituality, would, be part of the whole rather than compartmentalizing ourselves. Like our business self, I was very compartmentalized. I'm still known as Miss Professional. Um, but I really felt my wholeness coming through when I allowed, my personality to come into the room and, appreciate and see other people appreciate themselves and their little quirkiness and working with
Uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh.
And just celebrating all of ourselves as we are and elevating from to where we need to go individually and in community. It's just such a beautiful dance to see it in operation that way. So that's how I would describe that.
So, like, wholeness is what I got from that. Not
Yeah,
just parts of the self, but the entirety of who we are.
the entirety of who we are. And that discovery sometimes does take a journey because the event that happened isn't really the trauma, it's the impact that it had on the whole person. The and that's an evolving discovery over a lifetime. I'm 62 years old now, and I'm still looking at layers of myself. And I had a great support in a wonderful person who is my therapist, but also has just really been that, cheerleader in this part of my life. And understanding that the more we embrace ourselves fully and give ourselves great comfort rather than critique, judgment, criticism, comparison, competing with the other, those aren't helpful. They cause
Hmm.
suffering, but
I like what you just said about it's not the incident of trauma, it's the impact.
it's the
I
impact.
think that could free some people up because a lot of times we look at the incident and we judge the incident. Like, was it really that serious? Was it really that, horrible? Was it, well, what really happened as opposed to how did that impact me? Regardless of what it
How did
was
that
that occurred, how did it impact me? And if I can look at it from how it impacted me, then I can see my healing that I need. I can see the healing that's needed because now I've left the what happened and judging what happened and like you said, comparing it to, what this was worse than that. And because you would hear, I've heard that in especially generational conversations,
Hmm.
parent between parents and kids or grandparents and saying, oh, well, I had it worse than you when I was growing up, and you're complaining about because I did this or you didn't have that when you were growing up, but you don't know what I didn't have. So it's like the comparison of the what happened as opposed to, well, maybe whatever you endured, the way it impacted you is the way this impacts me, right? So they might not seem like apples to apples to you from where you're standing because of what you experience, but what I experience, the way it made me feel, and the way it impacts who I am today is it has a very strong impact, just as what your experience had on you or didn't have on you. Maybe you pushed it all down and you don't feel like you feel like you dealt with it and you just went ahead and you just
Right,
kept going, right? And here I am daring to express that it hurt me, that I felt the hurt, that I can see where it hurt me, and you can't relate to that. But when I when I'm able to say it's not my incident compared to yours, it's not my
right.
experience compared to yours, it is how it impacted me that I need to deal with. Not comparing to you or anyone else, but how was I impacted? Right. So that's very key. I think that's a very key thought process for us to begin using to release what happened, release the judgment and the measurement of what happened, and embrace how it impacts us.
Beautifully said, Lynette. It's the impact that it has
Mm,
had on us. Um, Along my career journey, I left the hospital in 2022 and I went to work at a nonprofit that provides treatment services to victims of sex trafficking, domestic violence, sexual assault. And the requirement of that role is that I train as a rape crisis counselor. So that additional layer and really listening to the stories as
mm,
part of the 40-hour training that's required of really courageous people taking their power back. And when you talked about the voice and daring, having the
right.
courage to
Mm,
say that this is my experience is the first measure of power
mm,
because the voice is the first, so the first thing that gets abducted by someone.
ah,
That's the
mm,
control measure. So even the
right.
courage of being able to state their truth
Mm,
and then being in witness with someone and saying, I believe you, I'm sorry that happened to you, I'm here with you, and whatever sound you need to make, or
mm,
whatever, because I work a lot with voice. um Whatever sound that needs to come out, because a lot of this stoppage, as we call it in somatics, the places where we feel stuck is where the
uh-huh,
story is typically where the story is.
mm,
And part of a somatic coaching experience would be, okay, giving an example of someone who says, I feel really nauseous when I start to think about it. So the nausea has data,
mm,
and the nausea may say, why did that happen? Like, give it a voice,
uh,
start moving through and giving all parts of ourselves, you know, and then asking what it needs in the moment. So for that person who may feel rage or
mhm,
anger unexpressed, not being able to do that because it would put them in jeopardy, right?
mm,
The first measure of power is for me when I see someone starting to talk.
uh,
And that's such a critical time, and I've had family conversations where, well, get over it.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
like you mentioned, what, the comparison,
Hmm.
that's it's the first entry point for someone to start to become disembodied from themselves
Right.
because they're being told how to feel
Hmm.
versus being recognized for the feelings that they're experiencing currently and needing support in.
Right. Right. Very good. Very good information. So, as a person who decides that, okay, I'm going to set some huge goals in my life. I'm going to dream really big.
Mhm.
I'm going to go for some things that I've never seen anyone else in my family go for, and I am going to, I want to believe that I can accomplish them. And getting to a place where you feel like you are, which happens to a lot of entrepreneurs, you feel like you're stuck, right?
Right.
You feel like you really can't figure out why you can't go further. Um, and usually you're trying to figure it out on your own, and you don't really have the tools to do that.
Mhm.
So, what would your suggestion be for someone who's like, yeah, I feel stuck. I've read a couple of books. I know there's something more I need, but I really don't know what it is. And there is no support system around me telling me, seek therapy or try this or try that. Most of the people around me are just looking to me to just plow through it and figure it out. What would you say to a person who is at that point in their journey?
That's a critical point in their journey, right? That's a
Hmm.
really critical point because this big endeavor they're taking and embarking upon that hasn't occurred in the family system as yet
Right.
is potentially um, the word, I'll just use the word, a threat to the existing system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big risk there
Mm-hmm.
um, to the person who's about to take the next step. I've heard a lot of that. It's called survivor's guilt,
Mm-hmm.
the one who made it,
Ah,
the one, and the burden that they assume of taking care of others. But in this interim time, they're isolated. So my advice would be to find community, journaling,
mm,
and really sitting with, the words, I feel stuck, and giving, so there's a tolerance to how much discomfort we can take, right?
right,
And
right.
that's the benefit of working with someone who can sit and witness with you and
Mm.
support you in a safe way
I
to,
love
you know,
I love that you said that there's a tolerance to how much discomfort we can handle because a lot of times we find ourselves running back to what we know is not working because we get into this state of discomfort. And if there was a way that we could really learn and believe that that place of discomfort is what we must go through. We must go through it. Like it's it's like how do we develop the skill to recognize that that discomfort is not this is bad, I shouldn't do it, or this just doesn't
mhm,
fit me, or um, this doesn't feel good, so I'm going to stop. How do we learn and understand that that discomfort is simply something that's unfamiliar to us? It doesn't represent something negative. It represents the unfamiliar, and that we have to get through that unfamiliarity and to get to the other side.
Yeah.
And I like what you said about having someone that can sit with us through it because alone we turn around and go back to what, where are the
Egypt.
covers? Let me get under the covers again. We really do need somebody else there to say,
And
no.
sometimes, Lynette, sometimes if we need to go back to the covers and, and take care, we talked at the start about wellness,
Yes.
because, with our way of being and being with ourselves, understanding ourselves from the inside out, that we're doing work that's aligned with what's important to us, and our values, and it has meaning for you. The stuckness could be the opportunity.
Uh-huh.
The stuckness could be the very opportunity, that really requires deep examination. And it can be done. It can be done through meditation if someone, doesn't have access to resources. But there are communities being established. When I found the somatics community, I felt as though the perfect convergence of my mysticism, spirituality, and neuroscience. So, for
Uh-huh.
folks that need the data,
Yes.
and the data is important, to support a real movement towards healing collectively and in community.
Mm.
I started 2 weeks ago. I started a donation-based meditation gathering that's going to be occurring every Sunday from 4:30 to 6 p.m.
Okay.
And most of the folks that have shown up are new to meditation.
Ah.
Um, and it's humbled me because even going into it, I made a lot of assumptions. Oh, if they signed up, they must be meditators.
Ah.
So rolling back the curiosity, but what was so beautiful in some of the sharings was, um, the pain I came in with in my lower back just feels a little bit better. Can you explain that? And I said, does it need an explanation?
Ah.
Because the explanations in you receive something, some comfort, some support, a relaxing environment for an hour and a half. Just invest. Invite people always to investigate. Discomfort usually is a huge signal, but everyone who's taken it to the next level will tell you the elevation just feels that much better,
Mm.
when going through it, because it's just right there at the other side, whatever it is for them in their pursuits.
Mm. And I think part to that point, they're asking, can you explain this? I think part of it is that, which comes into play when you talk about the mix of the mysticism and the neuroscience, knowing the logic behind it is sometimes things are so simple that we find it hard to believe because we've been sold the story that everything has to be hard and difficult, right? And if it comes easy, it must have been a fluke, maybe it was something that was very particular. So let me find out what exactly was it when it could be as simple as you gave your body just an hour of quiet time
Right.
where you weren't focused on your issues, your problems, where you felt part of a community, where you were interested and curious about learning something new. That could be all that it took for that pain to go, be lesser, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to uh numerated reason why, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is why it went away. Just that space
Well,
you gave yourself.
yeah, because I think our culture, centers around diagnoses
Hmm. Yes.
and treatment,
Yeah.
in a clinical way.
Right.
And I think, we're at a point, an inflection point in a community, especially in our community and Black community, to embrace our ancestral healing practices. Again, all done in community with elders who held the wisdom and passed it down. Even just remembering listening to stories when, we were little girls and listening to our grandmothers as they were cooking and telling us stories. We weren't writing it down and making sure that, you know,
Right,
we had it sequentially. It was just in order
right.
for you
Just
to
enjoying it.
just
However it
enjoy it.
flowed, it was perfect, right?
Yeah, the
They could
melody,
switch, yeah, they could switch topics or in the middle of it, it didn't matter. It was still a great, great storytelling.
yeah, so that well-being and living it, living in the stuckness, living through it, meditation again, even sitting through the discomfort of stillness. I often describe meditation as not silence, it's stillness, where there's a whole lot
Mm,
of activity happening.
mm,
There's a
I
lot
like
out,
that.
in yoga, we call it monkey mind is happening.
Yes.
So the gymnastics of the mind, all of that is data.
So where did we get the idea that meditation was meditation meant you're sitting with a totally quiet mind? Because we have that idea is prevalent out there. A lot of people think that until they actually take a class, a meditation and really learn about it. The ideal before you learn about it correctly is that you're quieting your mind and you're quieting your thoughts. And so your mind is empty and you're just sitting there without these thoughts going through your mind. Where did we get that?
I think I to track it. I remember, what happened in the 60s and 70s around college campuses and experiments with
Uh-huh.
all kinds of assistance to have a heightened sense of meditation. I think that's why they did it, because the mind didn't quiet.
That's a very good point.
The mind is not meant to be quiet. I think that,
Ah,
again, to be in community with ourselves and take in information. I've over the years, and my meditation teacher is 86 years old. I've been with her for quite some time, and all of us in that group that have journeyed together have had revelations in the middle of the room where we've had to be really supported and held, awarenesses that we were ready to grapple with. So it's very much a somatic experience, taking in the body's intelligence as well. So
mm,
I think that the challenge in society currently is that we're so content and cognitively focused that ignoring and overriding the body's intelligence, like that gut, I felt it in my gut.
yes, yes,
That's a very, 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 very specific organ. you
right.
know the gut has high intelligence, and it will react when it's out of attunement and out of alignment. We know
Hmm.
this. and,
Yes.
and it has a very strong reaction when we're not in our truth,
Mm,
as I said.
mhm,
um and I was, and that led to some of my decision even to retire earlier than I had anticipated, 3 years out when I would be the age. um Not responding to the calling I felt to take a different direction.
mm. So what do
And
you think? I have a couple of questions. One is, do you think we are getting more in touch with listening to our body, listening to the intelligence of our body, to realize that without us knowing all the details of how it works, we keep breathing, our heart keeps beating, we're asleep, we have so many involuntary functions that are going on without our attention to them that it just seems very logical that we understand the body is highly intelligent in taking care of its own survival, that if we just allow it to. And one testament to that for me is the what do they call it? It's on the tip of my tongue. The process by which when they do blind studies for a drug and they give some people a
clinical
sugar pill
trials.
and they give some people a sugar pill
Yeah.
and they are healed just as much as the person who got the real medicine. Like for every clinical trial about 20% of that population is healed as if they took the medication because they were told
Yeah.
they're being given the medication. So their body reacts in what with that any medication, it heals itself. They've even told patients they've had surgery, right? They put
Oh,
them
yeah.
under, did no surgery, woke them up, showed them a scar, we did this surgery to you, tested them like a week later, and whatever they were supposed to take out was gone because that person believed, oh, they went in and took it out, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then later on, they tell that person, well, I don't know if they ever tell that subject really, but they document that, okay, we did no surgery to this person and now the tumor's gone because they thought we did. So all of that is happening within, right? With nothing from the outside that we had to take to make it happen. Just our thinking and belief. Our body did all that. So the body is very highly intelligent. Do you feel like we're going through a stage now where we're realizing that?
Yeah, and really, again, beautifully sort of, illustrated with those examples. What I think is that we're turning and wanting
Hmm.
another way of being that doesn't feel prescribed outside of the truth of our our existence. As you were talking, the word divinity, the body's intelligence,
Ah,
the divine, it's the most beautiful set of systems that have been working, for as long as, our chronological age, says it's been working.
right.
Um, where we get overridden, I'm just going to go back to your original, one of your points around being told you should get over it,
Mm,
right? So that body's intelligence, that divinity is not being honored, not being recognized, and it's being told to feel a different way.
mm,
So again, the the wanting to be in truth, wanting, our systems to not make us feel threatened to live in the world,
right.
um, change of a political, party or not, really starts with, I think, again, coming back to this divine entity and all of its wholeness coming forward, not pieces of ourselves or giving away pieces of ourselves. And another way we can look at this is, in our language, how we engage with one another.
Yes.
Uh, it's on my bucket list to pursue formally, but I've been really interested in the work of nonviolent communication.
Hmm.
Um, and even going back to my roles in human resources and healthcare, the first point of harm corporately is in
Hmm.
language, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Something somebody said in some meetings.
Right. Right. That's where it all
So,
starts, isn't it?
and just, our adrenaline goes up,
Yes.
stuck in that story,
Yes.
and they come and tell someone, and then that other person's in the story.
Yes. Yes. You're
And it's
right.
like and so I've always thought to myself, in my opinion, in the role, what am I actually responding to? I'm responding to someone felt disrespected and disregarded.
Hmm.
And if we can have a conversation, with on both sides, I'll say, how would you respond if? Or can you listen to how this person felt when you said those words that felt insulting in front of a room full of people who, have our livelihoods in their hands?
Right.
And again, just turning back towards, towards one another. But once the adrenaline goes, the reaction happens, we come out of the body because it does, we feel that we have to protect and go into protection mode.
Hmm.
So, but if we can go underneath the language and find out what the dignity violation could have been
Mm.
around that incident,
Uh-huh.
it kind of gets to the heart and the closer to the solution that,
Mm.
I've seen, can
I
happen.
like that. The dignity violation. I like
It's
that.
always a dignity, I believe it's always a dignity violation. So one of my teachers in somatics, her name is Stacy Haynes. I highly recommend her book, The Politics of Trauma.
Okay.
What she does is take, it's similar to our conversation, Lynette, not only looking at the individual, the environment.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the environment of the entrepreneur. Are they
Right.
in a family where they're the first one?
Yeah.
That comes with a lot of weight and responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at society and systems that we have to work around and how they could be reinforcing harm that results in, traumatic experiences happening. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to have a lot of conversations in communities about addressing legacy traumas
Mm.
and intergenerational
Right.
traumas. There have been studies, you talked about clinical trials, there have been studies where there was a woman, this was told to me in one of my classes. There was a woman who was in a plane crash. It was a private plane and the plane crashed, and she heard a familiar voice saying, "Look toward the light in the interior of the plane." And she saw a sliver of light
Uh-huh.
and went toward it. In her therapy session, the therapist encouraged her to ask her family about this because it was very specific. And it came to find out that her grandfather and father were both in the wars,
Uh-huh.
and they were both in plane crashes.
Oh, wow.
And they never talked about it.
Oh,
Isn't that something?
that
They
is.
never talked. She did not know this.
Oh, wow.
But even something got played out over those generations.
Yes.
I don't know what that, could be. It was fascinating, but similar stories can be told. And even in our families, if we sort of put the threads of the
Right.
stories together, we'll see a common theme coming throughout.
Mhm.
So there's so much to explore for us to find the joy and power in our story, because the plane crash was one, but talk about honoring her body. She
Mhm.
heard a voice in crisis and followed it to
Mhm.
safety. That
Mhm.
was a somatic response that she had,
Right.
that,
Uh,
that came in. It made the difference. So, yeah.
okay. Today's podcast is being sponsored by Your 90 Day Success Journal for Black Women Entrepreneurs by Lynette Cottrell. The journal is available on Amazon. It's inclusive of monthly goals, weekly and daily goals, affirmations, self-care practices, and inspiring quotes from other Black women. Be sure to get your copy today. Your 90-Day Success Journal. Yeah, honoring that voice, listening to that voice. Like you were speaking earlier about your intuition, that gut feeling, listening to that and honoring that. Okay, that's an act of being in touch with your somatic system.
Yeah.
Okay, very, very good, very good.
Or when have you ever had the experience, Lynette, when you um, felt the hairs on the back of your neck stand up?
Mhm.
Yeah. What would you have? What experience were you having in the moment that
Mm.
that that your body gave that alert to you.
Let me see, can I think of something that happened? Well, I usually have not especially the hairs standing up on the back of my neck, but just I usually get a deep, what do I want to call it? A deep, I guess, an alert to danger or a low vibrational feeling, I want to say. It feels
Mhm.
like a deep, like a negative feeling that I get about it may be the energy of a certain person that I'm around that but I heed it because immediately I'm like, okay, I don't need to be around that person. I don't have to, I don't feel like I have to investigate it. I don't feel like I have to dissect it. I don't have to try to figure out who they are, what they're doing. I just know, okay, it doesn't feel good. I'm going the other way. That's it.
That's it.
I don't need more details. I know what I felt, and it felt so real that I know I need to go away from this person, and that's it in the story, right? And someone else may ask, because this happened recently, someone else might, well, what was it about them that I don't know? I just know it was a negative feeling. So that's all I needed to know, right? That it didn't feel right. So yeah, I get those very distinct um, feelings of energy, and it feels like it's either very positive, like when I met you, I got a very high vibrational feeling, very positive feeling, or or it would be a very low vibration, very negative. And I don't question either. I just go with it because I think there's so much about us that we don't know, right? I mean, like there's always some type of new medical information coming out about how a different part of our body works differently from what they thought it, how they
Yeah.
thought it worked 20, 30 years ago, right? But then there's our spirit, which we don't have new discoveries about because it's still very mystical to human beings. To explain the spirit, it's a mystery.
It's a mystery.
So I think our spirit is so highly intelligent, and that really can't even be the word to describe it, but it's the word I think of now. So highly intelligent and so speedy that instantly we get that feeling it's good or bad. It doesn't take an hour, it doesn't take a day, it doesn't take being around someone for a month. Instantly, you
Mm.
get that feeling, and that's it. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
this is my message to you. Take it and
Take it
go with it.
immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not drawn out. It's not slow. It's just instantly. So, you know, yeah.
And I call that divine alignment.
Yes.
There's no question. So just again, going back to folks who've had experiences that caused them to not honor the
Right.
hairs falling, standing on the back of their head. And not only that, be harmed as it, that's the repatterning that somatics and movement can offer.
Okay.
In my recent class, I opened with an arrival practice. And the first thing, I consider myself a bit of a naughty disruptor, going a different path. So I offered and invited the group to really, you know, settle into the place in their body that felt really good in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they said, "Oh, we didn't expect that you were going to say that." They expected, oh, because it's usually where you feel tense or tension, release.
Ah,
Like
got it.
find the joy. Let's do that first. And,
Right.
so- and again, active practice, right? We can take a different viewpoint, but the viewpoint For other, for people living with trauma, it may have to be something that is offered to them as an option outside of what life has told them could be for themselves, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So even even that little, like, what feels good? It's like, nobody leads with that. Let's lead
Right.
with the joy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's could be another example of the unfamiliar.
Hmm.
Sometimes the positive is what's unfamiliar. Sometimes well, this is too good to be true because it's something positive for a change. So we will run from the positive too. So
And how does that manifest? Not only imposter syndrome, but you've heard of, the self-sabotage that can happen,
yes,
that
yes,
gets us derailed.
yes.
And then it becomes sort of reinforcing of a limiting belief, and the self-doubt. And the cycle plays on again. In somatics, we can disrupt that.
Okay, I like that you said that. So self-sabotage
Yep.
and the imposter syndrome and somatics can disrupt that. So if you find yourself in situations where self-sabotage, you are close to being successful at something if you just stay consistent, and then suddenly you get inconsistent, or you say you procrastinate, or you just don't do what you're capable of doing. That's self-sabotage, and it takes you around in a cycle that you're used to going in. So it
Yeah.
takes you back to your familiar cycle because you are actually afraid of what that success is going to feel like and look like. Then you said imposter syndrome. So you've done the work, you've accomplished something, and you're there, but you're feeling like, um, how did I get here? I really didn't, you really haven't internalized your worthiness to be there. So it's like you have two conflicting things. You did the work and you're there, but your mind and your body is telling you that this is not a fit for me. So based on the stories I've told myself and based on the feelings I've
Yeah.
held in my body, in the thoughts I've held in my mind, there's a conflict with where I am and what those stories and feelings are. So, and what you're sharing with us today is that somatic exercises can disrupt that disconnect so that we don't find ourselves going into those cycles of self-sabotage
Yeah.
and feeling like we're an imposter, feeling so uncomfortable that we can't stay there. We got to get back to, where we were struggling to get somewhere because it just doesn't, those two things are just not connecting for us. So what are some somatic techniques or exercises that would be utilized to disrupt that?
That's a really good question. And as you were, sort of reflecting, back on imposter syndrome, I, can give a very real example if that would be okay for
Yeah,
myself, and
yeah,
something that it's an ongoing struggle. So my father struggled with addiction in the household. So there was a sense of foreboding when he came home.
got it.
And but before he came home, my mother and I would do crossword puzzles together. Um, she'd let me watch a few television shows, and I would see joy in her.
Mm.
And on this day, I was, I think, in seventh grade. I had won an essay contest in school, and they wanted me to come to read my essay at the parent-teacher conference in the evening, and my
Mhm.
father refused to take me, and my mother didn't know how to drive.
Mm,
So I didn't get to go to be celebrated for my
right.
where I've self-sabotaged, I can always trace back to that moment where I stood in front, thought that, I did something that they would be proud of, and I didn't receive
Mm,
that. So that's a repatterning. We call it reparenting,
mm,
giving myself recognition in a way where I'm standing in a mirror, hearing the words and looking in my eyes, like I'm looking, looking at myself right now, even hard to make eye contact sometimes with folks with
uh-huh,
them, and understanding that that was wrong. They weren't healthy people, he wasn't healthy.
mm-hmm,
And sometimes that takes the charge out of it being solely about the self. So, looking at the environment, there was addiction in the family.
right,
Uh, uh, Apparently, a lot of low self-esteem amongst my parents.
mm-hmm,
I came out, sort of happy and full of joy, and was always it shaped me wanting to be in the world, be creative.
uh-huh,
Uh, and I had to work on that. And one of the things I've had to do is, I always go back to what could have been a different outcome in that same story.
mm.
So in my version of that story, I did have a limo pick me up.
All right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a limo picked me up to drive me to school,
Uh-huh.
and to receive, and to receive, receive my award and hear the recognition of words that I wrote that got, got recognized by teachers who I, relied on deeply for my self-respect and
Mm,
my self-esteem. And they didn't even know what they were doing when they were doing that with me. So rewriting a story where it's life affirming to you, we have absolutely every right to do that for ourselves. Rewrite those stories.
I love that. Rewrite those stories.
Yeah.
And well, you said a couple of good things. And looking in the mirror, having eye contact with yourself. That's a big thing too. A lot of us are uncomfortable doing that. Um,
Why do you
and
think that is, though, Lynette? Why are we uncomfortable doing that?
because I think we are afraid of the emotions that are going to come up. I think it ties into your self-esteem and feeling that feeling that you're special. I think a lot of us don't feel that we are special, or feeling like it's a, what do you call it? It's a like an ego trip to feel like you're special. I think we are trained to feel like it's so noble to be less than, right? To
Yeah.
don't think you're brilliant, just accept that you're small, stay in the shadows, do more, right? Accept less and be satisfied. And like, who are you to be bold enough to look at yourself in the mirror and say some positive affirmations, right? And to say you're
Hmm.
incredible, to say
Hmm.
that you're great, to say that you're grand, to say that you're beautiful. It's like, why? And I think we twist it to to having humility as opposed to having a great sense of self-love and self-care.
Yeah.
Like it's so easy to be praised and worshiped for doing, just doing, giving all the time, right? There are places that we can do and give and just get praised for it, like religious organizations.
Hmm.
The more you give, the more you get the pat on the back. But nobody stops to ask you, are you taking care of yourself,
Yeah.
right? Or to even infer to you that you deserve to take care of yourself first. So I think that's the foundation of that fear of looking ourselves in the eyes and seeing what's really there,
Hmm.
paying attention to what's really there as opposed to avoiding it. Kind of like for a lot of women, it's hard for us to look at our bodies naked.
Hmm.
Right? We just avoid it. We just get dressed. We sometimes look at ourselves from the neck up and that's it, right?
Yeah,
We do the
yeah,
makeup and the hair, but the rest of the body, we just put something on and we can't stand in front of the mirror for a full minute, right? It's like, why do I want to look at that? You know,
yeah. No,
it's the same
it's
concept.
true.
hmm It's
Yeah,
very sad because that's your body and only you can love it, right? You are this person. Only you can look in your own eyes and love you and feel it
absolutely.
at the same time. Everything else is outside of you. Only you can love you inside of you. So if you avoid that eye contact with yourself, you avoid those positive affirmation, you avoid that self-love, you avoid looking at your body and loving it as it is. Those are things that you can never feel otherwise if you don't give it to yourself.
Yeah, you're right. You can't feel it for yourself. And also going back to the notion of what our environment is telling us about ourselves.
hmm Yes, that's
Our
really big.
environment is really coming in to shape the soma around privilege and those who are deemed not part of the mainstream that I hope we're beginning to see the dismantling even of that
Right,
concept.
right.
But it's always been, my desire over the thousands of conversations I've had with staff and, folks who are human beings showing up to perform is a sense of safety, a place that honors them and doesn't cause them to have to compromise themselves and their dignity. And that a lot of times come through the language, even delivery of news that may not be, the best outcome for an individual around a termination is leave them with their dignity.
Right.
And that can make or break someone. We don't know all of what's going on with folks, but if
Exactly.
if we can, even be with each other, um, and just offer comfort in whatever way that can look, I think it's part of our solution and healing, especially us as Black women, to continue to celebrate each other,
Mm,
not compete with each other.
hmm
Celebrate our bodies. When I started, and just to your point around the body, looking at ourselves fully, unclothed and honoring every part of it.
hmm
And in its healthy state, because folks have had, changes to their body as a result of, breast cancer and,
Right.
other that those people had to come into a brand new relationship with themselves.
Right.
And we have the opportunity to really spread that message that there's power in us and with each other.
Mm.
And that collective, even, bring the insecurities. Let's unpack it.
Mm.
Imposter syndrome. My imposter syndrome symptoms could be completely different than, someone else's.
Right.
So we're not monoliths either.
Right.
Um, let's share our stories and create solutions in this, especially in this entrepreneurial space,
hmm
because waiting for something out there to fix that part of us, those days are gone. We have it all. I
Mm.
believe from, the depths of everything that I've seen, out in the world and how we show up.
Mm. I agree. I agree. And I love that. And on that note, I think it really solidifies that community is where we find a safe place for these realizations, for these healings, to discover the modalities, and to hear stories like ours to help us recognize things that something you said earlier that we don't have the language for. So there are a lot that we might not have the language for today. It's very possible to have a feeling and not have the language for expressing it. That's different from not understanding what you feel. So you know what
Absolutely.
you feel, but I just can't find the words to put it together to say it clearly to you. But it's
Hmm.
known to me, but I don't have the language to express it to you. But the more I'm within these communities and these spaces where these things are discussed and these stories are relayed, and someone says something, I'm like, that that's that's what I've been trying to say. That feels like it expresses what I'm feeling.
Hmm.
So there's just so many benefits that come from being in community, and I'm so delighted that, like you shared earlier, you started your meditation course because just holding that space and building that community for us to be able to come together there and learn about meditation, what it really is, and not just learn about it, but to experience it. I
And
think,
the highs and lows of it. I always ask after a sitting, tell me the highs and the lows.
mm,
And for the newer folks to the practice, and it's a practice. And I want to just make one point about practice, and I feel like you and I could talk all night. That's how
I
it's
know.
been for us.
I
but
know.
but the coming back to that sense of it not being about calming the mind, it's about being with ourselves, including the mind,
So tell me about that.
with
Because
ourselves.
I've heard, and I'm sure my listeners are thinking this, I've heard that it's just about your mind being calm and you sitting and you being calm and quiet and peaceful. And so what did you mean about it's not about calming the mind, it's about being with the mind?
I think it's about being with our current state,
Love that. Love that.
whatever that current state is. For many folks, the holidays aren't a great time of the year for, all of the variety of reasons that there could be. So this can be a very tender time for folks. Coming into a meditation with
Mm,
that tenderness, you can say, I'm going to give you comfort and just sit with this comfort. Bringing a hand to your heart, feeling your touch of yourself,
mm-hmm,
at the heart center and saying, we're going to get through, whatever it needs to say. Because
mm,
usually when you come into contact with it, again, the divinity and the emergence just unfolds. And say, I'm going into a really challenging time. What will help me be in a better space through this time? Maybe I need to schedule 3 more massages
mm,
for the end of the year.
mm-hmm.
Maybe I have to call, that person that, if I haven't spoken to in 5 years. The minute we get on the phone, we're on it for 5 hours. Give
Right.
give yourself what you need. And that can get explored through the inquiry that can happen in meditation. I don't want to say that it doesn't give calm. It can, if that's the goal.
Mm.
Um,
So
I
wherever
off
you are,
right wherever you are.
yeah, I've heard in meditation, I've heard it said that, come as you are and don't set any expectations. Just let
None.
it be, just let it be. And I think that a lot of us come to meditation with all these preconceived. That's why I love the fact that you start out your sessions with the discussion and informing, because we come with these preconceived notions of what we're supposed to do here, and how we're
Hmm.
supposed to act, and what we're supposed to get from it, as opposed to just coming as we are and letting it, because that's not that process of just coming and being. It's not really played out in many areas of our living. So we're used to coming with an agenda or instructions or a goal we're trying to achieve, or we're working at meditation. We're working at meditating for peace. Working
Well,
at
that's
getting
why I said,
peaceful.
Sunday somatically, people somatically think of Sunday as a rest day.
Yeah,
So that's
that
already,
helps. Yes, yes,
that's already embodied somewhat.
yeah.
But I've been in part of meditation groups as a participant where people have just tapped into a rage pool that just needed to get expressed out. That's a release.
Ah,
So whatever was the repression,
right.
and again, not even really what I love about somatics, Lynette, we don't even really need to go into the story, because a lot of times telling the whole story
Yes.
is
Traumatic.
reinforcing. Yeah, it's just reinforcing. So the release of the impact, going back to impact, right? Um, is how meditation serves me and the community that I'm part of, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. The release of the impact.
The little release of, release of the impact. When I rewrote my story, the one I told you about when I was in
Right.
seventh grade, I wrote more. I stopped writing at one point.
Hmm.
I stopped writing, and then I read it out loud again, making sure that my voice, that where I
Ah,
experienced um, you know, trauma in that area, is, my biggest challenge every day. Coming on your podcast is like, oh my God.
we can't
And
tell. You're doing awesome.
no, thank you. That means, even you saying that just was meant a lot to me. Thank you very much. But again, that would, and the joy that just came through. I think sometimes we're looking for these massive experiences to overtake, but even if the micro movement,
Ah,
the micro step towards something else outside of I'm an imposter. No, there are some narratives going on. We call them limiting beliefs.
uh-huh.
And those narratives are part of who we are. And meditation can also offer an opportunity to explore, you know,
Right,
all of ourselves
right.
without deconstructing ourselves to say we have to fix it,
Got it.
but we do have to know about it,
Hmm.
and embrace it and take care of it and
Hmm.
honor it as part of our sort of database of information about ourselves.
Hmm. I love that. Ah, look at you. Dropping knowledge after knowledge. Something you said about um feeling it in our body, sitting with it. I like to say, because I've realized from my own experience that I can tend to let a success go by like that, like not acknowledge it. Just, oh, I did that, then I'm on to the next thing. And one day I just thought about how when something goes wrong, we have this replay tape.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it
It's
talks
much louder
about it.
than that success
Yeah,
clip.
all day long at night. You can't go to sleep because it's replaying. You wake up the next day and suddenly, if, out of the blue, it's back in there replaying. I'm like, so if we can replay all this, every little negative thing that goes wrong, why can't we start replaying the positive things? Why don't we pause and let those things sink in? So I've developed the habit of when something good happens, when I have a win, when I accomplish something, I make sure I take a pause and
Mm.
I sit with that feeling and I feel what that feels like to me because I want to get familiar with that feeling. That's what I want to remember. That's what I want to replay. I want my body to know that it's okay to feel good about that and just sit in that feeling for a while and pat myself on the back
Mm-hmm.
and just feel good about that and know what that feels like and let it not be something, let it become something that's familiar, right?
More, yeah, equally as familiar as that other narrative. And
Exactly.
you're building bigger capacity. So
Yeah.
your capacity for receiving is
Yeah.
expanding. Even you talking about it to me is transmitting to me because
Yes.
I could
Good.
see it. And again, sort of the energetics, the mysticism of
Right.
how community works. Hearing that you're having success,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to know about it. I'm excited about myself now. All of that
Yes.
just in this moment outside, I think you wanted me to respond to that. I just had a somatic experience of it.
Oh, good, good, good.
Because I was drawn to your page because I admired what I read of the work that you were doing and the
Uh-huh.
direction. You had more articulation on the direction I wanted to take. Well planned out as I was just starting out then. And yeah, our communities, our ancestral communities, remember what they did. They had ceremonies, they danced, they honored the environment, the land that that feeds us.
Yes.
All of that part of it, just gives us more capacity to experience joy and understand our power and also not to be defined by someone else's outcome,
Mm,
without touching, over the events over the last few weeks. Continue to move forward. Don't stay stuck. I
right.
think the activism, the activist part of me says continue to turn towards your greatness.
Right.
Continue to toward that star and don't get stalled out and halted by
Right.
I'll just use the social economic landscape currently happening.
Right.
I
Right.
think that trips us up as well because we've not been strong, economic, um, had strong economic base of power in this world.
Mm-hmm.
And now we are.
Right.
So what you do is phenomenal. Sitting with it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
understanding how it's showing up in the soma. Uh,
Right. Right.
you know what it feels like now as compared to, a feeling of disappointment.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think it's something that we have to um there are changes that we want to develop that we have to be very intentional about. So that's
Hmm.
something that I have to be intentional about because once I realized that that's what I was doing, like something good happened and I would kind of blow over it, like, yeah, so what's the next thing? And then I felt the misery. I realized the misery I was feeling about the negative things. And sometimes we could have a slanted view of what is really happening in our lives because of what we focus on most.
Yeah.
Right? So it can feel like something bad is always happening. But the truth is that we're just focusing on the bad stuff more, right? So when we give the good stuff its attention too, then we realize, okay, it's not, it's called gratitude. That's what
Hmm.
gratitude is. It's taking time to pay attention to the good stuff that happened, right? To journal about it at night or in the morning, or even just list it mentally before you fall asleep at night. What are some things? Because I found once I started a gratitude practice, I would journal about it in the morning. I bought myself a gratitude journal. I would journal in the
Hmm.
morning. And then at night, I would just think about, okay, let me think of three things I was grateful for today. And I would find myself, um, that list would be so long, it'd be like I'm at 5 a.m. I'm like, oh, I said I was just gonna do three things. I'm like, but this is good to have so much more to think about. And then I took it a step further. So, like you said, micro steps. So then
Mm-hmm.
the next step was so not to just run through a list of it, but to pause and feel it. So I thing one, to pause and feel, how did that feel? As opposed to just listening, oh, I this and this and this. No, 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 no. This. How did that feel? Why was I happy about that? And the feeling just comes over me again. Okay, now thing two. So it got even deeper when I took the time to not just go through a list of good things, but to
Yeah.
feel it
To
in my
feel it in
body
you.
again. So that took it even deeper. So it's like there are micro steps to advancing through the process of really investing in your somatic self, investing in that, in bringing that more to life, becoming more aware of it, making it more present. Right.
Very present, and you're so present in the work that you're doing out in the world, your entrepreneurship, tracking it, tracking yourself with it, the
Mm-hmm.
growth and the parallel of the two, very interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the higher the awareness, the more successful the person, is realizing,
Mm-hmm.
in their business for themselves. And I really loved, I don't know if you noticed, how you're a disruptor as well, because you're challenging the notion, I think another societal belief that's prevalent in our culture around living in humility
Mm-hmm.
and, self-denialism,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
because could be seen as boastful, but no,
Mm-hmm.
it's celebratory. It's celebratory,
Right. Right.
and having, the opportunity to be humbly examined. I heard the humility and how you wanted to understand yourself,
Mm-hmm.
but out in that entrepreneurial world, bringing all that engagement and awareness, self-awareness, it is a different level. Um, uh, Having a consciousness about the direction you're going,
Mm-hmm.
really honing in and having everything align around that and knowing when to redirect because you're
Oh,
listening or
yes.
feeling the hairs on that.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Definitely.
it,
Redirection is like, I used to be, and I tell entrepreneurs today to not be afraid to pivot because I used to see that as a loss or yeah, a loss. Like, okay, I started out, I said I was going to do this. Now I'm doing this, right? Why didn't I just keep doing that? Where sometimes that is just what gets you going because
yeah,
you're close to that, right? You're one step away from that. So you can start with that one step. Doesn't mean you're not going to curve and go right, or go back left. So you don't have to just stay on the same track just to say, I just stayed on the same track, right? You have to listen to those messages in your spirit. A lot of times, things come to me to do, and I just commit to doing them without examining them because I understand the message came from a place beyond my logic, right? If I could understand spirit and everything, if spirit took the time to tell me all the details, well, you're going to do this because 7 months from now, that's going to happen, and you need to be in this place to do that. If it had to take the time to tell me all that stuff every time, I would get nothing done because I would be sitting listening the whole time. Okay, so well, why do I need to go over here instead when spirit tells me go do that and
Mhm.
do 10 of these and do 10 of these, and I'm like, okay, let me just do it. Let me just do it because I know something good is going to happen. So just um having that faith and that trust and not feeling like. So I understand why they say why you are here other entrepreneurs tell you to dream big and don't share your
Yeah,
dream with other people
yeah.
because you don't know enough to be able to explain your dream to other people. You don't know enough to be able to explain the details of how it's going to work out. So once you start telling them and they start asking you questions and you don't have the answer, then suddenly your faith
Yeah, the
deflates.
self-doubt starts to creep in,
Right.
right?
And you're like, oh, I
Back
really
in.
don't know why I was doing that. But you're trying to prove a point to someone who didn't get the message you received, right?
I
So
never thought of it. Yeah.
yeah,
They didn't
you
get the, so we didn't get the same memo. Or
right. Exactly. That memo came to me for me to do it, not for me to check with you and see if it's right and then do it.
why
It
do you
came
think
to
that
you.
that external validation, I mean,
Yes.
it would be disingenuous to say that it didn't matter. It does.
Hmm.
Where do we get support for our big ideas in the entrepreneurial, community that is safe, supportive, collaborative? Um,
So you have to get it from other entrepreneurs who are dreaming big too.
yeah,
Right? You have to get it from like-minded people who understand that you're not going to know all the details when you first start out. A lot of times we can get into programs and systems around business that ask for you to have all the answers. And you can feel like you're not ready if you don't have all the answers. And you can even be told, well, until you figure that out, you're not ready. But that's not true all the time. And there are
yeah,
certain foundational things you do need to have in place. But then there are other things that are going to come down the line if you are in tune into trusting what your path is, right? So it's not a formula someone can write down for you and tell you do A, B, C, D, and it's going to all work out because you can do A, B, C, and D and it will not work out,
hmm,
right? So there has to be something more, something else. So a lot of times we are telling big entrepreneur dreams to someone who can't dream that big. They can't give you that support you need. They can't give you that validation because they don't dream the way that you do, right? So, and that's no fault. They're not any lesser of a person. That's just not the person for you to share that dream with.
yeah.
But if you're in a room of entrepreneurs and they all have big, crazy dreams, and you're telling your dream and it's just another, oh, yeah, I can see that. You're like,
Yeah,
yeah, because
yeah,
mine is this and I'm going to do that. You're like, oh, wow, that sounds,
yeah,
wonderful. That's where you get that community. That's where you get that feeling of, I fit here. Okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, it is possible. Okay, it fuels my faith in what I'm doing more, which is part of the community that I'm creating here is so that all those big dreamers who want to do things that have never been done in their family, that they don't have a model for, that they're just starting out and still wondering if they are crazy or insane for wanting to do
hmm,
it, they can come and find more crazy people just like them who are doing the same thing and trusting and having faith and who can tell them, yeah, 2 years ago I was right where you are, but now I'm here. Just keep at it. And they can build that belief and that faith in themselves.
Well, that's what you did on our first meeting. And you so graciously accepted my, can we meet and chat and get to know each other? So I thank you deeply for um, allowing that to happen. Just going back to a minute for what you were saying and how, your entrepreneurial mindset works. And it reminded me of another principle within somatics called organicity.
Ah,
And organicity is, once you're in the flow, whatever the flow is, not defined by anyone other than, your beingness and just being fluid with the movement and trusting, so that's a principle of organicity. Be another way of saying being in the flow. And I really loved how you described this. when I, check in with my mentor weekly, and she's a huge entrepreneur, a couple, big goals to achieve one day. And I asked her what she loved best about being an entrepreneur. And she said, you get to be as creative as you want to be. So to your point around, well, today I'm doing this and tomorrow I may be doing, and it's all, I don't know.
Right.
It reminded me of that conversation about the ability to not work in these containers that are job descriptions per se, or
Yes.
we get to do, what makes sense as we evolve, in our business, and as I'm going to coin the phrase on this podcast now, really embodied entrepreneurs.
Ah,
Just
I
being
like
fully embodied with, embodied with
right.
oneself.
Right, right. In touch with, aware of, listening to,
Hmm.
tap into. Got it. Embodied. I like that.
Well,
That
you're
word
embodied.
came
You're
to,
showing
yeah,
it
that
as an,
word came to me
right.
earlier today. I'm trying to think of what the context was, but I was thinking, oh, I know what I was thinking. I was thinking embodied and spirited. So embodied and inspirited. Somehow I was trying to,
Oh, I like that. I can play with that. Hmm.
yeah, I was trying to put those two together. So yeah, okay. All right, Sandra, I hear you.
So I have two more two things. So in practices like semantics, when we're trying to um, um, gain capacity to access new ways of being, 300 times. We, have it somatically. To be embodied takes 3,600 times. So like the practice of, the practice of meditation as being, a calming, maybe there's a community, and there are communities that promote meditation as a way to
Right.
quiet, quiet the mind. Somatics, I would say, is just really being connected to the whole, whole person, as our body intelligence, and being attuned to that. And
Um,
meditation could be, a medium through that. So yeah.
I love that. Connected to our body and being in tune to our body intelligence. I
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah.
Very good.
Well, Lynette, this has been an awesome experience. Thank you again, for the opportunity to have this conversation with you. And I hope your listeners, appreciate some of the wisdoms that you've imparted on me as a new entrepreneur. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. And tell us again, when is your meditation?
My meditations will I'm calling it, I entitled it Musings, Movement and Meditation with Susan. It'll be on Sundays from 4:30 to 6, if you wouldn't mind, because I'm very I'm trying to overcome perfectionism, and just I've launched myself, so I'm working on my website. But can I send you the details via email, and perhaps you
Sure.
put it
I'll
on your
put in the show
platform?
notes. Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
Definitely. Okay, wonderful. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Lynette. And I'll close this wonderful conversation by saying, speaking, from my heart to yours, that you're doing really awesome work to reach our women, our people,
Hmm.
and it's going to have an impact on us over the, course of many generations. And
Oh,
you know,
wow. I
thank you. Well,
received it.
when you have change, in economic realities, it does impact generations. So the work we do today are for our, for our children. So thank you.
Thank you. Hey, sis. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope You got some great gems today from our beautiful Black woman entrepreneur. You got inspired to go do more. You got re-energized and refreshed. We want you to take the best care of yourself. It is our deep belief that we as Black women entrepreneurs deserve to build our wealth without sacrificing our joy or our health. So we deserve to have the joy, the health, and the wealth. And we love helping you to get there. Again, be sure to leave a comment, rate our podcast, and share it with another beautiful Black woman that you know of. Visit our website at www.wocib.org and check out the great merch we have there for you and the workshops. We're working on some wonderful things for you. All right? We look forward to staying in touch, and until next time, be well.